Income inequality is a significant driver of homelessness, with stagnant wages for many low-income workers and a rising cost of living. A growing number of families are living on the brink of homelessness. Rachelle Ellison has experienced homelessness firsthand and now advocates on behalf of the unhoused. I met Ellison at our offices here in Washington, D.C. Rachelle, this is your story. You're willing to talk about it, but I'm just wondering, and I'm going to ask a number of questions about your life, but I'm wondering, does it get easier to tell the story? Was it difficult to tell the story at first? Talk to me about the experience of sitting down and talking about your life.
Well, in the beginning, it was harder because I hadn't healed from a lot of the traumas and the things that I couldn't overcome. At that point in my life, when I started actually speaking, it was 10 years ago with the National Coalition for the Homeless. And that's when I started sharing my story. And I learned as I healed and as I worked on myself more and more, it became easier to share my story because I knew that this was the path I was supposed to be on. And I'm supposed to share my story because I've been able to overcome so much that someone needs to hear that there are ways to overcome the obstacles that you don't see any way around.
So let's start there. What was life growing up for you?
Growing up for me in the beginning of childhood was very traumatic. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 3 years old. My mother remarried, had a beautiful family. My father remarried, had a family, and I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. So I felt like I was an outcast as a young child. And my mother, who back in the day, bipolar today was called manic depressive back then. And she was diagnosed with being a manic depressive, but she was in denial. So she would not accept any type of medication or therapy. So what she did was she took it out on me. So at 5 years of age, I was severely abused. My mother would throw me up against walls, punch me, beat me, call my stepfather home from work, tell me she hated me. She wished I was never born. She should have aborted me. I would never be nothing. I would never be anybody. So I thought this happened when I was 5 till I was 7, and I thought I'd go live with my father and things would be different. And I went to live with him and his family, and at first it was okay. And then my father started molesting me. So I was scared to tell anyone until I was 12 years old. I started skipping school. I started hang with the older crowd. I started drinking anything I find around the house because my family was very dysfunctional, so there was always alcohol left over in cups, and I would just sip it down. And I'm 12 years old, and then I would go in the refrigerator. I didn't care what kind of pills they were because I knew what was happening to me was wrong, but I didn't know what to do about it. I was scared. And at 15 years of age, I pretty much got emancipated, and they sent me to a place called the Martin Pollock Project in Annapolis, Maryland, which was an amazing program. But you have to remember, I've had all these traumas and no therapy and no way to get baseline. So I felt like I was free. I was trapped for all those years in that trauma-filled early childhood. And at 15, I started being promiscuous. And I wasn't in Annapolis 3 months, and I got pregnant with my first child. And I was so excited to be pregnant at 15 because I was finally going to have somebody who was going to love me unconditionally just for me. It was never going to leave me, so I thought. So I started being very, very open with relationships and really didn't know what love was and thought it was love. By 16, I was pregnant with my second child. By 19, I was pregnant with my twins, and it was just really downhill. At 17, I escalated to snorting coke because one of my children's fathers was doing it, and then freebasing cocaine came out, and I wanted to do what he was doing. I wanted to fit in the crowd. I didn't know who I was. I was a follower. So I started freebasing cocaine, and I did not realize that my life was about to take a very dark, drastic turn.
Ellison is a speaker and advocate with the National Coalition for the Homeless. She is also a peer recovery specialist and executive secretary of the People for Fairness Coalition. One of the things people don't think about is that age. Those are formative years, 5 to 7 years old, you're being abused. That's a lot to deal with. And as you said, no counseling. It's easy to see how someone can spiral downward after all of that.
Mm-hmm. And I actually did spiral downward. In Annapolis, Maryland, I actually seen myself going to some very dark places. And I took my children to social services myself, which was one of the hardest things I had ever done at that point, because I had to think about, I didn't want to drag them into the darkness I knew I was about to encounter. And I wanted the best for them. And right then and there, I wasn't the best for them. So it took a lot of love to do that. And when I walked them to social services, they immediately, instead of letting me say goodbye, they zoomed them away. It was really, really traumatic. That, again, I'm experiencing some more trauma because I'm doing this because I love my kids, and you're acting like I'm abusing my kids when I brought them there myself. So they were in foster care. I was out there pregnant with my now 35-year-old son. He'll be 36 soon. And I was just really just running from the pain and devastation and agony. I didn't know where else to turn. I didn't see any way out. And I decided I was going to get myself together and get my kids back. And I went in rehab, and it was called the Raft House Drug Treatment Center in Annapolis, Maryland. And I met this guy from D.C., and I still stayed clean, and we got married. I dated him, we got married, and I got my kids back. But when they were bringing my kids back, they brought all back but one. And him and I ended up, I was pregnant with his child as well at 20, because I married him at 23. And I ended up getting pregnant right away a year after we got married. Well, she was born a year after we got married. So I ended up getting all my kids back, but they came back with all but the first child that I thought was going to love me unconditionally forever. And I was so excited about having. And come to find out, the foster parents left him outside by the swimming pool, and he fell in the pool. He was underwater for 15 minutes before paramedics found him. And he was in a comatose state at Johns Hopkins Hospital. That was May 27th of 1988, a day you'll never forget when you get that call, when you hear that your child is in a coma. And my other children went back into foster care, and I went straight to Johns Hopkins Hospital with my child. They wouldn't let me see him. My mom and I had tried to, have some type of relationship. She immediately drove to Baltimore. And when I went into the room, he just had all these tubes, and he was just like, it was like he was already gone, but he actually lived in that comatose state for 6 years, and he ended up dying July the 1st of 1993. In the meantime, I got all my children out of foster care. I won custody back. The judge seen me trying, and he wasn't willing to terminate my rights. So he gave me my children back, but the day my son died, I just ended up going really, really, really hard. And this time when the police came and got my children, it was for good. They got adopted into another family, all except the child that me and the gentleman that I married from D.C. had. He brought me to D.C. a week after my son died, and he died July the 1st of 1993. So I've been in Washington, D.C. ever since then. And when he brought me here, I didn't realize that he was a person who hustled on the streets at the time. So we weren't here a good 6 months, and he went to prison, and I had no skills. I didn't know anybody. I was here in D.C. I was lost. And without him, I didn't feel like I had anything. His family, anything was really accepting me, so I gave my daughter to them. And I hit the streets of the nation's capital for the next 17 consecutive years.
What was that like? Talk to us about that.
Living on the streets and being homeless, I felt invisible. I felt like people were walking over top of me, like I wasn't a human being. It was so lonely. It was so scary. And then I met these individuals who also were homeless, who actually taught me how to live homeless here in the nation's capital. And I lived in Franklin Park and Pennsylvania Avenue and 5th and K and 4th and L. And I also had co-occurring disorders. So I was mentally unstable. Now, mind you, I hadn't had any of my traumas dealt with at this point, and I was starting to incur more trauma living on the streets of the nation's capital. People would walk by me from the FBI building. I became a scam artist at that point where I could talk really well, and they were actually giving me money. And then I was crying because I was like, I'm going to die out here. Because the people that are trained to know that I'm a scam artist are giving me their money, and I thought that was just my sign, that it was just meant for me to die in the street. They're trained to arrest people like me, and they're helping people like me.
Many homeless people struggle with physical and mental health issues and a lack of access to health care. Without proper medical treatment and support services, individuals experiencing homelessness may find it difficult to maintain stable housing or employment.
Storytelling. It's what my career is built on. I love it. But listening to you, I can tell that you're a storyteller. But the story comes from you, but it's aimed at somebody else. And that's the importance of your story, isn't it? You want to connect with people out there who need to hear this message.
I definitely want to connect with people out here that are still in the unhoused population with co-occurring disorders or what doesn't have co-occurring disorders, because I want them to know that someone overcame those obstacles, and if I did it, you can do it too.
High levels of unemployment can contribute to homelessness. Without a steady income, individuals and families may struggle to afford housing and basic necessities.
You said you were trained on how to be homeless, and I find that fascinating. I mean, what's the training like for that?
Well, the training is someone taking your hand and showing you where the soup kitchens are, where to get free clothes, how to sign up for the SNAP benefits, where I have to go to sign up for the Social Security benefits, the disability, and then I was going to a soup kitchen that I had been shown at 945 G Street called Zachariah's Kitchen. And at that time, that was downtown bid and Pathways to Housing, D.C. And a gentleman worked there, was the director named Jonathan Ward. And today he's the deputy director of Mobile Crisis Outreach. But back then he was the director of Pathways to Housing, D.C. outreach team. And he just seen something in me I didn't see in myself. And him and Chet Gray, God rest his soul in peace, who was the director of downtown bid at the time, kept telling me, we see potential in you, we see potential in you. And I'm looking around like, who? Me? After 17 years in the street, after having all these co-occurring disorders, I mean, being a returning citizen, going in and out of the jail system, it was like a revolving door. They used to tell me, welcome home, Rachelle, over at DC jail and CTF. And then I ended up going to the feds. So I didn't see any way out, because when you're homeless, you're going to commit crimes because you're in survival mode. And that's the only way you eat. That's the only way you get anything.
Lack of education, criminal records, and discrimination can make it difficult for some individuals to secure employment.
Healing's another word I want to talk to you about, because when we break our arm, it heals over time, but your form of healing is just an ongoing journey in many ways, isn't it?
It definitely is. I still have a lot of healing to do, but I've healed through so many traumas, situations, forgiving people, forgiving myself, and helps you become into a transformative action, where like you're a caterpillar, but you're transforming into a butterfly. And you can see the butterfly effect starting to happen because you change without your permission in the healing process. You become a different person.
Family breakdown, including domestic violence and parental rejection, can lead to youth homelessness. Gay, lesbian, and transgendered youth may face rejection from their families, putting them at a higher risk of homelessness.
What was the toughest part of transitioning? Was it the counseling, having to go back and revisit all of these things, think about it? I mean, can you describe that process? Because we all think, oh my God, if I was out on the streets, that's just the worst life in the world. But it was one you embraced for a lengthy period of time, because I think the other option is you have to face all this stuff and go back and revisit it and try and make sense of it, which in a way is just as painful as living on the streets.
It is, but the difference this time was I went into the 12-step program. I got a sponsor. I started doing what they call step work. And you have people that embrace you that have already walked this and have faced their traumas and their demons and have learned how to forgive. So you're around like-minded people and people that want to empower you to become the woman you were created to be. So yeah, it was very painful. It was very traumatizing. In the rooms, we have something, that I always knew there was a God. So admitting I had a problem and it was unmanageable was not a problem for me. Coming to believe a power greater than me wasn't a problem for me. Making that searching and fearless more inventory and not leaving anything behind was a year-long process for me. And it was one of the most painful things I've ever done in my life, because I literally had to forgive my father for molesting me. And he never said, I'm sorry. And you have to learn to be okay with an apology you're never going to receive and still move on in life, because me carrying resentments or holding resentments keeps me stagnant while everybody's moving on with their life. So even though I had to relive what he did to me, and I had to forgive my mom, and my mom and I today are building a relationship, and we have an amazing relationship because I've forgiven her. My father, I forgave him, but I never seen him again in life. And he passed away, I believe, 3 years ago. They left me out of the obituary. I didn't grieve because he took that away from me. I didn't have any good memories to grieve. And it was like I was never attached as his child. So I just, okay, he's gone. God, God rest his soul in peace. And I know God got him Judgment Day. So the vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So I just kind of fell back and fell into the spirituality of the recovery process. And when you fall into the spirituality of the recovery process, there's nothing that's not achievable to me. Once I buried my child and put my child 6 feet in the ground, now that I've grieved him, I've only grieved him in the last 10 years because that's when I became baseline. That's when I stopped using drugs. So then I started facing all the traumas of the street and being gang raped. And, you have to make amends for things you've done too. You're not free in all of this. I've done a lot of harm to people. And I've done a lot of mean things, illegal things. So I have to try to make amends as well. And then forgiving myself was probably the hardest piece for me, because that meant I had to accept the fact that my son was dead and gone and I was never going to see him again. And the grieving process started then.
And then the importance of one other word, hope. Can you talk about that? Because that's something that's missing when you're out here on the streets, right?
Right. If someone hears my story, I would hope that it would give them hope and inspire them to know that if I can do it, they can do it. And there are ways to overcome the barriers that you see that you feel like are just never going to be overcome. And my theory is, if you can't climb a wall, break through it or build a wall to get over top of the wall.
You speak now to do public speaking, but you also talk to legislators, policy people.
I do.
What's the impact that you have, and are there things that legislators have said to you that, are rewarding, where they come up and say, wow, I can't believe your story, or what's that like?
I wish, as an advocate, I'm a known advocate in the DC area. So when they get to hear my story and they hear me advocate, it has an impact. And I know it has an impact because today I'm the assistant director of an organization called People for Fairness Coalition. And we are an organization who tries to end housing instability through advocacy, peer mentoring, and outreach. And we all are homeless or formerly homeless, and we run the organization.
Wow. That's a major milestone, right?
It is, because I've been advocating for the last 5 years. Then when I'm on Capitol Hill advocating to change policies, and it's amazing because people actually recognize you and people call my name, and I'm like, I didn't even think they knew who I was. But people are watching, and you're just doing what you do. You're just walking in your passion.
I've got one final question for you. It's a quote I found from Mother Teresa, and I just wanted to, listening to your story, I wanted to read it to you, and I just want to get your thoughts on what she had to say about homelessness and poverty. She says, "We think sometimes that poverty is only being hungry, naked, and homeless. The poverty of being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for is the greatest poverty of all."
And that is the greatest poverty at all. Because when you don't feel those things from other people, you don't feel them for yourself. When you don't feel them for yourself, you can give up hope. And my thing to individuals that are still homeless out there, or individuals that are living in poverty, they can take everything from you but your dignity, your morals, and your values and the way you see yourself. So don't let them give them the joy of taking that. And when they can't take that from you, there's so many doors that are going to open. Because I'm under attack at all times, but I also know that I'm blessed. And if somebody has to attack me, then I can't imagine what's on the inside of me.
Rachelle, delight talking to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Been an honor.